Yeah, right. Well, good evening, everybody. Yet another talk by myself. On the 25th, Colin is going to be doing a talk on FLARM. But this evening, we're going to do a sort of short talk on. We're going to do a short talk on the ladder because Chris Fox, who flies down at Denbigh, has done quite a good job on the ladder over the last couple of years, and there's been some changes. So one of the first things, which I'll just mention, is that he's actually introduced two ladders, two-seat ladders, both for a pure two-seater and a turbo or motor two-seater. And basically it's designed, it's a competition whereby you can fly with a P1 who hasn't flown cross country and is not up to interclub league standard. And basically the idea is to get instructors to fly cross country. So they've got these two ladders coming out, and there'll be a certificate awarded at the end of the year to encourage people to do more cross country training. And rather than having two experienced pilots flying in a two-seater, one's a sort of a tyro. So that's one of the things that's been introduced this year, which I haven't put on the talk. But as I sort of intimated on our talk or on my email, I'm just having a look because I want to get this thing working. There we are. So as I said on my slide or on my email, I gave you a list of what we're going to do. And so the things that we're going to cover this evening are why do it? Well, it's because it's fun, basically. What we're then going to look at is the start, turn points and finish, just so that it's all clear as to what we can do. And then we're going to look at the shape and speed factors that are involved in setting up the ladder. And David Dodds and Sally have organised, with the help of Kate, have organised a Jedi ladder. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit because that's one of our local ladders. And the idea is to get, people to start practicing cross-country flights, before actually, doing their silver distance, just to get into the idea of actually how we plan and execute a flight. And then we're going to talk about declared and undeclared tasks. And we're also going to look at using the ladder with a new thing that he's come out with, which is a thing called GLAVA, which is basically a sort of an unsophisticated version of CU, but it's quite useful. And so we'll go through that. So coming back to it, why do it? I started gliding again in the year 2000, and by about 2007, I sort of got the hang of it. And there was all these sort of what I considered to be gods flying around doing these big tasks, and I hadn't been using the ladder. I hadn't bothered with the ladder at all. It didn't mean anything to me. And then I had a look, and they're saying, "Oh, he's just done a 500. He's just done a 300." And so I went and had a look at the ladder, and I thought, "Hang on a minute, I can do that. What are these guys doing? This is easily possible." And I found it great fun, having a go at it and extending my boundaries, which brings us to the next point, which is what you're actually doing with the whole point of these ladders and the trophies that we have at the club as well, is what we're doing is we're comparing, improving and learning from our peers. And obviously you each have a peer group, or we all have peer groups, and we undoubtedly, we learn off each other, and we compete against each other for those that are competitively minded, and basically improve yourself as you go along. And it's really good to have a look at what people are doing, because on a certain day, you'll be surprised what actually can be achieved. As I say, This year, actually, although it's not been particularly brilliant up at you know, here in Scotland, down south they've had a remarkable year. And considering the fact that we didn't, you know, with COVID, we lost quite a bit of the season. Andy Aveling, who won the ladder, got the second highest score ever. The ladder in its current format has been going since 2007. As I say, John Williams has got the highest score. I mean, Andy Aveling got 30,000 points this year, or just over. And John won in 2007 with 33,000 points, which is going to be a really hard record to beat. But it's really good to see what people can get out of the day. And what we now have is a facility where you can actually, on the ladder, you can actually play the flight without having to download things and all the rest of it, and have complex equipment like CU. So it's really useful to have a look and compare what other people are doing and learn from them. Another thing, which Colin Hamilton unfortunately can't be here tonight, is to use the ladder for statistical analysis. You know, we've got this flight level 100 exemption, so we can fly a glider above 10,000 feet without a transponder. And one of the reasons we got that is because we proved the statistics, or we showed the CAA the statistics as to what we were doing. And actually they were quite surprised, a bit shocked really. So we've got that. And you know, we've got things like, you know, the possibility of Balado setting up an ATZ. There's plans to possibly increase the size of the TMA. So putting every flight on the ladder, which is of significance, say more than 30, 40 kilometers, and, you know, any height above 3,000 feet is really worth putting on the ladder, so that we can turn around in the future and say, well, this is what we've been doing. And if we do it nationally as well. So it is actually, we do use the ladder for statistics. So, as I say, what we're going to look at is start points. We're also going to look at turn points on the task and the finish points. They've changed it this year. Nowadays, what we have is, let me just get a little arrow so that you can, let's just go, it's gone, not to worry. I'll just come back a bit. For the ladder, basically you've got a line 10 kilometers long or 5 kilometers radius. And basically if you cross that line, then you can, then you start the task. You've actually got to cross the line. Now, if you miss it, it's not a big deal, because what you can also have is as the 90-degree sector, and you don't actually have to put these in your log or anything like that. You can use them. You can select your start once you've done the flight, and to get the best advantage. Like, for example, with the 90-degree sector, obviously it's a further distance that you're going to go from starting with a further in the sector, and basically that means you're going to go slightly slower than if you use the start line. So that's basically the start, and it's quite simple. Now, when we come to turn points, what you've got is a 90-degree sector that is of infinite size. You can make it as big as you like. And one of the things you don't have to do is you don't have to go round the turn point. You just have to go into the sector and come out. So you do not need to go around the turn point. So that's the normal one. What you've also got is half-kilometer barrels, right? So what all you have to do is just enter this barrel. But what will happen there is that if you use the barrels, then every time you use one, they're going to knock a kilometer off. okay? And it used to be the rules that if you set the task and you use back, that once you use a barrel, you've got to use it every time round the task. But having looked at the rules, it doesn't say that anymore. So you could use a sector and a barrel if you felt it was necessary. I don't see anything at the moment. You would be, you could check by what's the word, by calculating the task and see if it worked. But there's nothing in the rules at the moment that say you can't do that. So, yes?
Sam, can I just interrupt for a moment? There's a question in the chat. Do you have to cross the line on track and not going the wrong way?
I think you can cross it the wrong way.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought it's...
Yeah, I think you can cross it the wrong way. You've got to, the thing about the ladder is that it doesn't, as long as you've entered the sector, then you've started. And when you come out of the sector, you can come out of the sector going the wrong way. But if you know, that's how I understand it for ladders. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. So as I say, you've got the half kilometer barrel, and then what you also have, which they use in competitions, is you have a combination of the sector and the barrel, and they call it a thistle. But personally, I don't see much advantage to that, but they use it in competitions. But you can do that as well if you want. So those are the term points. And
sorry, Sam, just another interruption to pick up something from the chat. Phil is commenting that the FAI rules don't say that. So,
well, this is it. This is why I'm saying this is ladder. I don't really want to get into FIA because it gets rather complex. We're just talking about the ladder. But as I understand it, for ladder flights, you can go the I might be wrong on this, but I might be wrong on it, but I know of flights that have been scored on the ladder going the wrong way. Phil, if you want to butt in at any point, then please do so. But we're not talking about FIA because, you know, quite honestly, it starts getting all a bit too complicated, which I don't really want to. I just want to talk about the ladder. What we will talk about at the end is the silver distance. But when we start talking about golds and things like that, we'll talk about the FIA in relatively small bites, if you see my point. Okay, so there's also, which they've introduced recently, is, well, people have had area assigned tasks in competitions, but they've also introduced things called variable sectors. And the area assigned task is usually used in competition. And what happens there is that basically what they give you a turn point with a defined radius. And basically they also give you a time in which to complete the task. And basically what you do is you fly as fast as you try and do as much distance as possible within the defined time and get as close to that time. It's a rather complicated form of competition. Now you can score using, if you do a competition and they've given you an area assigned task, you can score it to put it on the ladder. But the rules are, according to the ladder, is that what they'll turn around and say is that the sum, so basically the radius of the sums of all the area assigned tasks will be deducted from the distance, right? So if you get to this point here and then carry on, what they'll do, and you do 300 kilometers or 100 kilometers, let's suppose that they'll knock that off. So if it's 20 kilometers, radius, they're not 20 kilometers off your task. And depending on the radius of the other one, they're not that radius off as well. So that's the area assigned task. So you can score them, but they take away the sum of the radius of the area. Now they've also introduced in competitions. So there we are, that's it said there. They've also got variable sectors. And what we've got is that you'll have a waypoint and there'll be a variable sector on it. And you just have to enter that sector and you've turned the turn point. But again, what they'll do is they'll take away the radius of the sector. Are we all quite happy with that? Any questions on that? Oops, sorry, I'm having a wee bit of a problem. I'll just move this out of the way because it's a bit annoying. Let me move that. And I can't get a pen. So, any questions on that? Okay, we'll move on from there. Right. So now we're coming to the finish. And again, what we have is a 5 kilometer line radius or 10 kilometers, and you've got to cross that line. And again, you can have a sector, and that sector can be of infinite size. And lastly, what you also have is a finish circle. And at competitions, they normally make it 3 kilometers. But you can make it as big as you want or as small as you want. And the idea behind it is to basically, if you've got a busy airfield, to avoid, whizzing in and upsetting the circuit and all the rest of it. Obviously, if you have a 3 kilometer line, then you've obviously got to have enough height to get back to the field. So those are the 3 finishes. Right.
So can I chip in again, just to comment again from the chat, just to say someone is pointing out that a valid ladder flight might not necessarily be a valid badge flight, and people should.
Oh, absolutely.
About that.
Yeah. No, we will. These are. We'll come to that because we will absolutely. You've got to. You see. I don't really want to get into that too much. We will cover some of it, right? Like if you're doing, people are asking, basically, if you're doing a goal flight or a closed task flight where you start and finish at the same point, you've got to have a 2 kilometer start line. Sorry, a 1 kilometer start line. So that means that the radius is just half a kilometer, as opposed to 5. So you've got to fly much more accurately if you're doing 4 goal flights in excess of Silver Sea. You have to have, it's a 2 kilometer start line, which is I'm not going to go into it because it screwed me up on a 750. Well, what actually happened was I did a 750 and I went behind the start line. I went behind the start line rather than going through it, and the flight was invalid. So I did this really hard 750, really worked hard at it, and I busted my balls over it, quite frankly, and I didn't get it. I didn't mind because it was a good flight. I just do it again. I mean, I've done 2 now, so 3rd time lucky. What's the big deal? They're just diplomas, what's it matter? Yeah, the whole point is to have fun. So there we go. Right, so we're all happy with finishes as far as the ladder is concerned. You see, again, for a finish, if one wishes to know, you cannot use an FAI, you cannot use the 90-degree sector for a finish on a goal flight. It's all got to be straight lines. But that's another thing. We're talking about the ladder. The FIA is rather is a bit more complicated. Right. Now here we have an example of an FAI 100-kilometer triangle. This is our club task, right? Now, if you fly through the start point and the start point is you're using 0.5 kilometer radius, and you go around the task, that will be an FAI 100-kilometer, and you can win a record, right? As I have done. I've got the 100-kilometer record, FAI, you know, which I did up at Lochte. But for the ladder, this is a club task, but it's also an FAI triangle, and we'll come to that later on. But if you use CU, what you actually have up here is basically what you have is that any point within here will give you a 28% FAI triangle, because that is the one that's used for records, because you can have a multitude of triangles, but for records, only a 28% will do. Okay, so this triangle is a club triangle, so you don't have to declare it. You can just go and do it. And not only that, you can go either way, and you'll still get points for it on the ladder. Okay, so that's a club triangle, but it's also an FAI triangle, or record triangle, 28% record triangle. One of the things you've really got to be careful about is the 1,000-meter height rule when you do a closed circuit task, or whenever you do any task, right? And basically, and it is a heavy penalty, is that for every 10 meters, you've got 1,000 meters. So basically, if you leave Port Moke at 3,210 feet, I think it is, you can come back and land at Port Moke, and you won't have broken the 1,000-meter rule. But if you're at 4,000 feet and you come back to Port Moke at 600 feet, you'll have broken the 1,000-meter height rule, and you'll be penalised it, because everything's calculated in meters. Well, you can calculate in feet if you like, but it's easier in meters. But for every 10 meters of height loss, you lose they take a kilometer off your distance. So it's a heavy penalty, and I've done that often, where I've actually crossed the finish line once, and then I climb and I cross the finish line again. Okay, now we've been talking about triangles, and it's all based on the FAI triangle. What you've got is you get scored for various points, right? Well, you get scored for various things, and basically one of them is the shape of the task that you're flying, another one's the speed, another one's the handicap, right? There's let me just have a look at what they all are. Let me have a look. Where did I put it in my notes? Yeah, distance, speed, shape, handicap, and then there's a completion bonus. And there's also other things as well. There's quite a few things that go up to scoring for the ladder. But the shape, the best shape that you can get from the scoring point of view is the 28% FAA triangle. And as I say, that's the triangle that's used for records, right? For closed task records. We'll come to out and returns later on. But that, you know, you've got a triangular record. If you win a record, it has to be a 28% FAA triangle, right? Any other triangle will not do. And I don't know why they've chosen it, but if you think about it, when you're flying across country, what you've always got wind, and wind is always going to have an effect on your soaring performance. And by doing a triangle, you're going through the whole compass rose, if you see my point. That's not strictly true, because you do a quadrilateral as well, but that's the basis. And so just to go through it, what we've got here, the ladder triangle, which is 28%, is in black. The FAI 28%, an FAI triangle is in yellow, because you can have FAI triangles of various shapes, which we'll come to. Right. And then lastly, what you've got is the cyan triangle. Now what that is the shape. And basically 108 is the highest shape or the highest score that you're going to get on shape. And basically what shape is what shape is the task that you're doing for the distance that you're covering. And they've deemed the triangle to be the one that gives you the highest score. All right. Now what you can do, all right, is, as we can see, what you can do is you can do a dog leg, right, of up to 5% of the total distance, and you won't get a shape penalty. Now, let's suppose that that's when we look at the shape of it, is a 500K triangle, right? Well, 1% of 500K is 5K. So what you can do is you can do a dog leg of 525 up to 5% of 525K, and that will still give you an FAI 500 triangle, right? And you could do that as a record as well, because they would turn around, that would be a 500K FAI triangle if you declared it as such, if you see my point. Because one of the things that you can do is, in the ladder, what you're allowed is up to 4 turn points and a start and finish. So if I just go on there, what you can do is, initially the start, I'm having problems with my, there we go. Let me just get a pointer. There we are, laser pointer. There's the start of the triangle. Here's the start of the triangle. All right, now there's normal triangle, but what you can do is you can put a dog leg in it, and it will not penalize the shape if it's less than 5% of the total distance, okay? And what you can do is you can claim it as a ladder flight of 525 kilometers, or you can claim it as a 500 FAI triangle if it's 28%. And the other thing you can do is that you don't have to start at an end, you can start in the middle, as long as you end up finishing at the same point there. So there's various things that you can do. So as I say, what you can on the BGA, on the ladder, is you can have up to 4 waypoints and a start and a finish. They can be separate. But if they're separate, it's not a closed task. Okay? Whereas the FII, because people keep asking about it, they only allow 3 turn points and a start and finish. And so you can see that the BGA ladder is slightly more flexible. Right. Now, again, you sort of sit there and say, why do you need to do a dog leg? Because the most important thing is, you can have all these bloody pretty shapes and all the rest of it, but what you've got to do is find where the weather is. And that's where you start using the shape, right? So you can have a dog leg to avoid airspace, like an airfield or, you know, a control zone or whatever, okay? But it will have any, you know, as I say, it doesn't have any effect up to 5% of the distance. But if we go into other shapes, right, these are shape factors of a 0, and they are all FAI compliant. You can do your 300-kilometer goal flight with that sort of triangle, or as an out and return. Okay, now what you've got to do is to have a 2 kilometer start line rather than a 1 kilometer start line, keep saying that, rather than a 5 kilometer. Okay, so that's got a shape factor of 1, right? So it's gone from 108 to 1. So you're not going to get scored too highly on that. And if we just carry on with that a little bit further, there's another sort of triangle that you can have, which is a 25-45% triangle. And when we say 28%, what that means is that one leg has to be a minimum distance of 28% of the distance of the triangle, right? And in this case, the triangle has to have a 25% triangle, and it can be up to 45%, up to 45%, okay? And that will give you a shape factor of 105. Whereas these two are shape factors of 1, okay? Now, when you sort of sit here, right, you're thinking, it's not actually that significant when you come to it, but we're just talking about it because people wonder about it. So the worst shape is the double out and return, or if you're just going straight to a goal. And a goal is not necessarily a straight line. You can have a dog leg, right, on a goal. Say you want to go, you declare a Boyne as your goal, but you go to Feshy on the way. That will be a shape factor of 0.82. Any questions up to now on that lot? So we're going to finish on shapes, because here we have a quadrilateral, and as you can see, what you've got is the shape factor, which is 1. We've got the FAI, what you get from an FAI, which would be a triangle for FAI distance, right? And what you've got for black is actually the ladder task. Now you could use that to go around the London TMA, for example, which is what people have done, okay? So as I say, black is the task, yellow is the FAI triangle, which you could claim, and cyan is the concave or convex hull, the shape of it, okay? You see, that, again, would qualify for a 300 if you followed the FAI rules. You can see that underneath there is the FAI triangle, and that will qualify. You can see the shape factor is reducing, it's 0.99. And here we again have a shape factor of 0.98. And here we've got a FAI triangle, got our shape factor, okay. And lastly, we've got the bow tie, where we go like that, like that, like that, like that. And what we would get is a FAI triangle of that size. We've got shape factor and so on. So we've spoken about shape, and there are other shapes which you can find on the ladder, because it's a mine of information, and there are worked examples of it. So, any questions on that? Right. Now the speed factor, basically if you're flying below 50 kph, you'll get 0. And this is where we really start coming into it up in Scotland, because where we lose out on the shapes, right, we really start to make up on the speed, right? Because once you start getting above 100 kilometers per hour, the speed factor starts to increase significantly. I scored the highest ladder score ever for a 750 5-point task that I did, and I deliberately went out to do it. I think Ed Downham did 1,000k and John did something like 850k or something like that, and I beat them both on a 5-point task with a start and finish at the same point. And I got something about 7,000, over 7,000 points for that, which is the highest score ever on the ladder. And that's because I did it at about 145 kph handicap. So I got a fantastic score. Their scores were less than mine. And basically, if you start getting above 115 kph, you're really starting to score a lot of points. And I think the reason for it, and I haven't been able to find the evidence, is because they assume that tasks are done with 3-knot thermals, and they haven't really thought of wave. So it's a way of beating the bastards. Fly fast. Because if you look at triangle flights, thermal-wise, they never score many points. It's wave flights that score points because they're so fast. Right, so we've spoken about the ladder quite a bit, all the shapes and speed and all this sort of stuff. And just to recap, there's a variety of factors: distance, speed declaration, shape, handicap, and there's also a completion bonus, all right, which will give you an extra score. Now, as I said earlier, what we've done, I'm just going to take a sip, just a glug. We've got a lot of relatively inexperienced pilots that wish to fly cross country, and so there's been discussion about it. And what we've thought, or what David Dodds and Sally, and with assistance of Kate, have come up with is the Jedi Ladder. And what it stands for is the just effing do it ladder. And basically the idea is to have tasks in the locale of the of Port Moat where one can practice setting tasks, flying them and gradually extending one's boundaries. Because if we look at it, this year we had 99 flights below 105 kilometers, and 24 of them, of the ladder flights, were below that distance. And David Dodds, what he's done, as I say, with Sally's help, is they created a number of waypoints in addition to the local waypoints that are on the BGA waypoint list, and basically you can fly around them. And to qualify for the Jedi Ladder, what you have to have done is, or not done, is that you haven't done a 50k straight line distance flight from Port Moat in the last 3 years. Now, a lot of people go down to Huzz-Bos and do their silver distances down there, and then come back up to Port Moat, and they seem a bit more timid about going cross country up here because the thermals are just not as good. And so, as I say, it applies to anybody that hasn't done a 50k from Port Moat in the last 3 years. Obviously, if they do one, then they go up into the BGA ladders themselves. And David has done 2 flights, but only one of them has the sectors on it. And I'll just give you an example of it. So there it is. And so basically they've constructed these turn points. And so basically he started at Glenvale Car Park, which I don't know where it is, and then went to Port Moat, Caravan Site, PCS, BGA Waypoint, and then to Balgady Toll, and then to the RSP Vane Farm, and then to Glenvale, finished at Glenvale Car Park. Is there any points that, I don't know if David's here or yourself or Sally would like to make a point on this, would like to contribute?
I don't think David is here this evening, but yeah, it's just what you said, Sal. I think it's a really nice idea that some of the points are very local and you can practice going around them without ever going out of gliding range. And this flight of David's, he was just showing an example of that. So I think he didn't set out to do these points, he just fitted it to a flight he already had. But you could set out and give yourself some local turning points and practice going around them, practice turning a point accurately, heading for the next point, all of that kind of thing. And some of them are a bit further away. They're within 50k range, so you can gradually stretch out. Dominic's been having some very interesting suggestions about categorizing them so that you start with the local ones and gradually move out. I think it's a great idea. Yep,
it's good. See, well, you know, looking forward to seeing how it goes. And these flights, you know, can be put on the ladder. I will say one of the things when we're doing these flights and we've got all this equipment, the essential thing is always to keep a good lookout, you know, particularly where in the locale. And this is not a good example because David, you know, has only they've only introduced the waypoints recently, and the weather's not been good. So this is just a very local flight. You know, there are obviously waypoints further away from the airfield. Right. So we're going to go on to declared and undeclared tasks. And this is a flight I did at the beginning of the year, where what I did was I set a 300-kilometer flight and I didn't manage to do it. And so what you can see is that up here is the furthest that I got from Lochte, right? And in that case, which proves the point, I went through, and actually that's not true. I did go through it in the correct way, okay? And so what I did was I went down there, went down to Lochte Arc and past Lochte Arc, and that is the furthest distance that I would have been scored on a declared flight. Now, one of the things about declared flight is that this was 4 waypoints, was my declared flight. It was, it's start and finish in 3 waypoints, okay? Now, I could miss one of those waypoints, not get to it, and I'll still be able to complete the flight, and I'll be scored accordingly. If you miss 2 waypoints, then you won't be scored as a declared task, but it would be scored as a declared task if I miss out one of the waypoints, but the flight would be devalued. So that's one of the things. So I looked at this and I only flew 86 kilometers. I thought, well, I'm going to get no points for that. So what I thought was I'll sit round and I'll see what I can get out of it as an undeclared task, right? So I sat there and basically I just looked at the closest waypoints and I came up with a task of starting at Monzi, going to Lochte Arc. As you can see, I went past it, then to my own waypoint. Now we've spoken about the waypoints that David and Sally have created. Any waypoint that you create is headed by an asterisk, right? So I went to, and these are ones that I've had in my data bank for quite a long time. And so I have these waypoints, Sierra Charlie 3, Sierra Charlie 4, and then back to Lochte, and then I flew back to Port Moat, and I finished at Port Moat, making sure I was above the 1,000-meter height restriction. When I say within the 1,000-meter height restriction, and I've got 860 points for that. Okay, so just as you do a declared task and it doesn't work, you can get quite a bit of points out of it. So, as I say, if you miss one turn point on a declared task, it will be a devalued declared task. But if you completely crap it, you can turn it and just use the day and make it an undeclared task. Any questions on that? Okay, we'll move on. We're getting on behind time. A bit behind time. Now, there is another ladder, which is the OLC, which is the online competition, which is a European German thing, and you don't declare anything, right? And what they give you is up to 5 3-turn points and a start and finish. So you just wander off during your cross country and you'll get scored accordingly. So as you can see, what we've got here is that what I did was a total of 252 kilometers according to OLC. But if I looked at the triangle, I did a 113-kilometer triangle. And all you have to do is just register for this as you do for the BGA ladder. And it's quite interesting. I always compete on the two. It's quite interesting. If you really do a really big flight like John has done, you can win a prize. And he got 2 weeks flying in Namibia because he was the highest scoring pilot in Europe in 2007. So he was given the opportunity to fly in the Bitawasa. Okay, so that's a good fun comp as well. So now we're going to look at the ladder itself because there's a couple of things, you know, a couple of new changes. And what I'm going to do, and this is where hopefully I don't mess myself up, is that what I'm going to do is if I go to a new share, right, and I go to the BGA ladder on Chrome, and I've got it. Okay, so let's just go to the ladders. Now, what we have, right, these are the ladder details for 2021, clubs, all clubs, region, all regions, and open ladder, right. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in Portmoak, all right. Scottish Gliding Union. Now, what they've introduced is regions now. So we've got Scottish and Borders. Now then, let's just have a look at the ladders that we've got. Now, before I clicked it all on, it was the nationwide one. And so what we have within the SGU is the open ladder, which applies for any SGU-based pilot flying at any site in the UK. And then you have the SGU ladders, right? And we're allowed 5. And as we can see, we now have the SGU Jedi ladder. So if we look on that, I'll just click on there, show ladder. And all we can see is that this year we only have 1 flight. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you is how we can play the flights. All right, so what we do is we go to show filters, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to last year, right? I'm going to go to Portmoak as the launch site. Okay. And I'm going to go to November. All right, so I've done that. Okay, now what it's got here is select multiple flights. So I'll select multiple flights. And so what I do is I'll select the 19th of November, and that's me and Phil flying. Okay, so go back up to the top, view flights. And hopefully it's all going to work. Okay, so there we are. So there's the flight. Now what I can do is I go to settings. This was a real nail biting. Is Phil with us?
Yep.
Right. Interesting flight. Really bugged me, this flight. Okay, so what we do is that what I'll do, because it's more interesting if I put it in takeoff time. So I've got it in takeoff time, I'll make it 250. And what you can also do is you can put the satellite picture for the day. So there it is. There's a satellite picture for the day. All right. So I'll get rid of settings and I'll play it. Let's just go back to there. Let's get it right down. Because what happened, there we are, we're both off. I'm blue, Phil's red. This is on takeoff time, so we're both taking off at the same time. And Phil's starting from Lochte Arc head, I'm starting from St. Fillan's. All right, so I went and explored the Lochte wave. Phil's down at Lochte Arc, and then, you know, there he is, he's off, right? Or is it Killen you started? I can't remember where he started. But anyway, there we are, off up to Edzell. So I'm knocking the shit out of Phil here, right? And then what I want to do is to get onto the Lochte Arc, which is what I call the Lochte Arc. So I jump a couple of wave bars. Phil's overtaking us, but then Phil starts to get into a lot of cloud and he really has to slow down. Whereas I carry on up to, I think it was Glenfalloch. And there we go, off we go. And Phil's struggling there a bit and I'm on my way, right? But there he is. He had a shorter turn point at Killing. And we're now heading back up to Edzell, right? And I just go for it, whereas Phil actually turns short. And then I really cracked out because I was down to about 3,500 feet. So Phil's racing ahead of me, right? And I start to catch him up, but then I'm really low compared to Phil because he was following a much more safer mode of operation. And he gets to the turn point faster than me. So his task was faster than mine, but I actually completed the task. So he missed the waypoint, whereas I completed the task. And I was quite a bit slower than Phil, but I won it. So great tool this, and you don't have to have CU for it. Now, what I'm going to do, let me just move something out of the way, is I'll go back to daily scores, right? And I'll clear selection, right? Now, if you go onto the ladder and you go to flight details, you'll get the GLAVA, but it's not very good if you're doing a single flight. So what you can do, right, is that if you go to, let's just go to daily scores. Let me just move this out of the way. Okay, if I go to tools links, right, here's GLAVA, right? So if I now select a flight, let me just move this out of the way. If I select a flight, all right, so where are we? So if I select that flight, so this is the flight for the 1st of January. And if I just go to settings, right, and I'm not going to play it, but if I put up the sat pick, there we are. Okay, so, and that's a big picture that you'll get, because if you look at flight details for any flight, the GLAVA is a lot smaller. Whereas if you want to do it for a single one, just go to tools links and use the real GLAVA. Okay, so I think lastly, what I want to show you is, let's just go back to, this is where I get a bit mixed up. Let's just do that. Right. Let us just go back to my info. Right. We're finished on this. Right. And if I look at my info, there's the ladder flight for this year. These are my ladder flights. And if I do that, for example, you'll see how much smaller the flight is. Whereas if you go to tools links, you'll get it big scale. Okay. So that's that. You can put photos up. There's your flights. And what we have is the club tasks, right? And if you can claim it the right way round or the wrong way round, okay? It's all for, and all you do is just click on it and it will come up and you just put in what you've done, right? And here are my personal waypoints, which is what Sally and Dave have done for the Jedi Ladder. If you don't have those personal waypoints, they won't show up on the ladder if you're using somebody else's ones. Okay, so right, what we'll do now is I'll just go back to our last slide. Let's make sure I get the right one. That's it. So this is the last one. So if we just go on to the last slide, there's just a point about the silver distance. Now the rules, I don't know if they've changed recently, but I was just looking at this the other day. And so if you're going to do a silver distance for your silver badge, what it is a straight distance flight from the start at release to a finished fix. It doesn't have to be a finish, just a fix, located at least 50 kilometers from your release point and at least 50 kilometers from the fix recorded at the beginning of the takeoff roll. So it's got to be more than 50 kilometers from the release point, and it's got to be more than the fix recorded at the beginning of the takeoff roll. Okay, and I think the rules have changed slightly. Okay, so you couldn't take off, go to Fife Airport, fly 50 kilometers and land. That wouldn't count. You've got to be 50 kilometers from your takeoff point. Okay, so there we are. I think that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye for now.